And what I'm going to discuss today will be based on this title, which, as you can see, can cover more or less. Yeah. But I've thought about structuring the presentation as follows. Let's see if I can go this up. Like this. So I'll provide you with an overview of the current state of EU free trade agreements and the rationale behind. And I'll take a quick look at the FTAs that we have concluded and that we are about to conclude. How important are they in terms of trade coverage? How important are these parties to us? I will also go through the types of economic analyses that we carry out to try to assess the impact of all the negotiations that we carry out. And there I will take a specific look at some of the ex post assessments as opposed to the ex ante assessments, which we have seen quite a few of lately. And then finally, I will be quite short on the next trade policy communication because it's next and we don't know exactly what the Commissioner would like to put into it. But I'll give you a flavor of some of the ideas that she has floated. So if you recall, if we go back 10 years in time, we had what we call the Global Euro Communication, 2006. The main, I would say, contribution of this trade policy strategy was that the EU gave up the moratorium on free trade agreements which we had in place at the time and decided to launch a new set of free trade agreements with partners based on the following criteria which you see there. Economic potential, meaning that partner countries shouldn't only grow quickly, they should also be a big economy, so that the potential sort of the economic growth that you could see every year is of course much more important if this takes place from a large basis than from a very small basis. The level of trade barriers against EU export interests, both tariff and non-tariff barriers, and the extent to which these partners carried out negotiations with our competitors. And there was also an emphasis on the need to include deep integration elements in these FTAs. Part of the strategy here was that there was a realization that much of the gains from free trade agreements will come not only from tariff liberalization but also from liberalizing so-called behind the border issues. It was seen that it would be important to try to reduce non-tariff barriers as well. That could be anything, both in goods and in services, to address competition issues, government procurement, and other types of trade barriers that are not the ones maybe you think of up front. And then, of course, it's also very difficult to achieve consensus in the WTO. You want to move ahead with some of these issues and need consensus of the 161 members, I think there are today, 150 at the time, and that's not easy. This was under Peter Nilsson, 2006. A few years later, then in 2010, under the Belgian Trade Commissioner Claude Giffoost, there was, of course, his mark on trade policy, what he wanted to do during his time as Trade Commissioner, where I would say the Trade Growth and World Affairs communication had four, I would say, main building blocks. It was to pursue the negotiating agenda, trying to conclude the Doha round, trying to make progress on the bilateral free trade negotiations that we started under Global Europe, and also to bring neighbors closer to the single market. It was to deepen our strategic partnerships, make progress in our relations with the US, with Japan, China, Russia. I think US, Japan we are now negotiating with China we have negotiations for an investment agreement ongoing, while relations with Russia are not maybe what we thought at the time that they would be today. And there was also ideas how to take trade policy forward, moving into emphasizing the link between the internal and external market opening, to come up with an investment policy for the EU, and on trade and development we introduced the new general system of preferences in 2014, so that was also on its mandate. And then, as I mentioned, I will come back to say a few words about the new trade policy communication a little bit later. This is EU free trade agreements, that's known as WTO, which is, well, I showed you this because it's striking. You think about free trade agreements, you think about regionalism, and when you think about regionalism, you think about trading with countries that are close to you. I mean, the dictionary of trade policy term, there's actually something called dictionary of trade policy term, says that regionalism as actions by governments to liberalize or facilitate trade on a regional basis, sometimes through free trade agreement areas or customs unions. But as you see here, many of the free trade agreements that are carried out, at least by us, but also by others, it's not only the immediate neighborhood, it's also spread out all over the world. Okay, so that brings us into the EU and FTA's next slide, where I have put together my very own personal take on the rationale, highly non-scientific, but anyway, this is how I would want to classify it. So take that with a grain of salt. I would say that the rationale for EU FTAs over the years have been the following. Preparing for membership, it's clear after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the association agreement with Central and Eastern European countries, that was clearly the goal, the ultimate objective was accession to the EU. Relations with neighbors, we see that in Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. And that secured political developments, but we of course also have relations with neighbors such as Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland, which is a slightly different type of relation with the neighbors. Development-oriented, the trade preferences that were provided under the Lomé Conventions and the Cotonou Agreement to the so-called ACP countries were challenged in the WTO, and these had to be converted into something that's WTO consistent, meaning that we are negotiating, or have negotiated, perhaps we still are with a few countries, so-called economic partnership agreements with the ACP countries. And then finally, economics market access. Yeah, we'll come down to what I said in the beginning here about global Europe, where we identified Korea, India, the ASEAN countries as those that were sort of priority partners, which we said in 2006 we wanted to conclude free trade agreements with. Since then, things have changed a little bit. So the economy has developed or maybe not developed, meaning that today we're also negotiating with Japan, with the US, and we have concluded with Canada. So when I put this together, economics market access indent, I was thinking maybe I should have a fifth one, which is called other, but I didn't put that on there, maybe for next presentation. So in fact, we end up having some form of a preferential trading arrangement with all but just a handful of WTO members. I was actually trying to think about which they are, because in the cooking now is actually to take a closer look at whether we should do something with Australia and New Zealand as well. I think that leaves us with Taiwan, Hong Kong, and then you figure out the other countries if there are any more. I don't know if you can see that. Is that visible from there? It shows you the value in absolute terms of EU exports and imports with the countries or groups of countries with which we have concluded free trade agreements. And you see the concluded ones, they account for, on average, maybe 35% of EU trade. And you see, sometimes what you don't really consider, that the EFTA countries are really important for EU trade. And the neighboring countries are still important. The Euromed countries are important, and Turkey is important. This is not probably what you think of when you try to guess the EU's main trading partners. You would probably say Japan, or because it's the second or third largest economy, but no. These countries are important. And if you look at the future, of course, TTIP dominates. It would account for, well, they account for about 18% of our exports, about 12% of our imports, and would, of course, make a significant change to EU trade if such an agreement would be concluded. But just to give you an idea about how important various countries are, and as you can see, Japan is actually not as important as you may think. We account for 3% of our exports and about 3% of our imports, while a group of countries like the GCC are far more important. No. Before the Commission can start negotiating free trade agreements, we have to pass something that was called, until very recently, the Impact Assessment Board. The Impact Assessment Board is an outfit within the Secretary General in the Commission, which has been revamped under the new Commission and under the Better Regulation Initiative. And it's called these days the Regulatory Scrutiny Board. So this is slightly outdated. So before we can ask for a negotiating mandate, we need to provide an economic analysis, actually an analysis of the economic, social, and environmental consequences of the initiative we propose. So the economic analysis comes into as an input to this first stage here, the impact assessment. Once that passes the scrutiny board, the impact assessment board, we can request from Council to get a negotiating mandate. If we get that, if negotiation starts, throughout the negotiations there will be a study undertaken which is called a sustainability impact assessment, which builds on previous economic analysis but adds qualitative elements, it adds stakeholder consultations, and it adds some more things in depth which we couldn't do in the first initial impact assessment. And all this is quite confusing because it's called impact assessment. Many of our studies we call them impact assessment. So when you start speaking about impact assessment, you don't really know if you mean impact assessment in the Secretary General kind of impact assessment, or if you mean a new study assessing, the effects of something. But this is the formal impact assessment, sustainability impact assessment. Then in the communication 2010, we promised that we would undertake an analysis of the potential impact of what we have negotiated. So once negotiations are concluded, you don't have to guess anymore how much is being liberalized, how are ITVs tackled, how ambitious are we in the services area. No, we have the text. So we do a new study where we try to assess the impact of this free trade agreement based on the actual underlying tariff dismantling schedule and all the other information. So this comes at the end of negotiations, but before the agreement is sent to Council for signature and to Parliament for approval. Then, of course, once sufficient time has lapsed, we also undertake ex post analysis. But bear in mind then that the tariff dismantling may take 7, 8, 9, 10 years to be, to have all the tariffs coming down, and you need adjustment from the economic operators to have all the effects in the economy. And if you then want to have time series data of a minimum 5 years, you don't do ex post analysis immediately after, even though some of the politicians often want to see what is the impact of this or that just a few years after. I'm going to come back to the ex post analysis in a short while, because there are a few features which I consider to be quite interesting. I mentioned the methodologies we use to measure the impact of trade liberalization is usually these computable general equilibrium models. Are you economists out here or not? Or some of you are, maybe you will. Otherwise, you can just remember that these are different types of methodologies which are more or less better suited for different types of analyses depending when in time you do these. So computable general equilibrium models, partial equilibrium, and econometrics, which is, let's say, a fancy word for statistics, carried out by economists. Don't quote me that. Quickly, on these CG models, because they are important, they have been criticized, and they have pros and they have also cons. But the pros are, of course, that they provide for linkages between sectors, within countries, across countries. So if Germany needs steel to produce a car, it sources then maybe steel from Poland. This would be good for the Polish economy, and Poland in turn will perhaps source something from somewhere else, which will feed into their steel production. So you capture these linkages. You capture that you will have an increase in transport services, that may be good for, if you buy cars, unfortunately maybe repairs and after-sales service. These kind of things are captured by CT models. But the sectoral details are limited. And what we say, trade economists, that we count the number of products traded, and we say that 6-digit level, which would be a blue car with 4 doors. That's at 6-digit level, and then you would
we have it at 8 digit would be a blue car with 4 doors with a 1500cc engine. You know, this kind of, the further down you go, the more details you get. At 6 digits, we have 5,000 products. These models have 57 sectors. So of course, you don't get the details. You get very broadly what the impact may be on the economy. And then certain elements are difficult to assess properly. I'm not going to go into this here now, but that's just to keep in mind. Now, I said I want to come back to the ex-post assessment. I also said that it takes time. You need the tariff dismantling to have been fully implemented. You need some time afterwards to have a proper time series to see what has happened to the economy. So we actually haven't done too many of those. I would say that we have done one real, which is the Chile one, which is available on our website, which looked into not only the trade effects, but also how the institutional setup under the EU-Chile agreement, how that has functioned. And I think it was a substantive analysis, which I think is of quite a good quality. But since we are always being asked to assess the impact of this or that the day after they were sort of concluded, more or less, I'm slightly exaggerating, we have started to complement these type of ex-post analyses with figures on what we call preference utilization rates. Meaning that if under a free trade agreement, we agree to lower tariffs on a number of products, and then if we see in the trade statistics the next months that our exports are actually not making use of the lower tariffs we negotiated, that's an indication that something is wrong. So these figures are readily available from partner countries' customs authorities, and we have started to gather a database on such numbers to try to see how are we performing, because on the other side, on our imports, this kind of data we've had available for 10 years or so. Next slide will be one on preference utilization rate I'll show. And I'm also going to come back to how to deal with anticipation effects. First, preference utilization rates. The blue bars are the use of EU exports in partner country markets, the extent to which we use those preferences we have negotiated, while the striped ones is the partner use in the EU. And Korea is not in here because we have had a separate exercise on Korea, and I'm not even sure I could fit Korea into this picture anyway. But our use of preferences in the Korean market is about 66%, which is not awful, but it's not very good either. And you see we have very high preference utilization rates in Serbia, in Turkey. In Turkey it's about 96% almost. And it's not because it's a customs union. If that question comes up later, then I can dig deeper into that one. Serbia high, I said. Switzerland fairly high. In some other countries it's also decent levels. Nicaragua, Panama, it's very low because the agreement entered into force in 2013. So these yearly figures are simply tainted by the fact that you have a full year of FTA in place. But you also see the nets. Egypt, Algeria, 50%. It's not very impressive. Lebanon, 40%. And Norway, less than 30%. Now, the data we got from the Norwegians were aggregated and not sure about the quality, but at least it points to us that it's something we need to look closer into. So this is the type of analysis we do, try to complement this more serious, huge exercise of the ex-post evaluation of the free trade agreements, where we send people into the field and try then also to assess how the institutions work under their respective agreements. We're going to do one on Mexico, and I think perhaps, but I'm not sure what we plan more. So the Chile one is available, the next one comes Mexico. I mentioned something about anticipation effects. So let me show you this. This is what we looked at for EU trade with Korea. And you see EU exports, blue line, EU imports, red line. And you see points in time here. Start negotiations, May 2007. We have initialing of the agreement here somewhere, I think it was October 2009. And it's provisionally applied since July 2011. Now, when we looked at the impact of this agreement, which we thought was too early because it's been in force for, well, 4 years today, actually, 1st of July 2015, we said we can't really do this. We tried anyway. So
what we tried to do was to look at the literature where it says that sometimes you have impact of free trade agreements even before they enter into force. There is both theoretical and empirical evidence on this, which we're a little bit intrigued by. So what we started out doing was to compare the impact of the EU-Korea FTA, and we compared with the period before the start of negotiations. So we didn't compare here whether it entered into force. We didn't compare this period with everything on that side. We compared this period with that period, this period with that period. And then we compared after entering into force with the period before the start of negotiations. And we found an impact, statistically significant impact. This is on EU exports. We found also statistically significant impact on Korean exports to the EU, but the impact was slightly lower. So you have already after the start of negotiations, we could see a statistically significant impact on EU exports, and we are controlling for everything there is to control for. And the only thing left that we can think of is anticipatory effect combined with removal of uncertainty. The impact slightly higher after into force goes up to 15%. And then the second puzzle, after having discovered what we discovered, after having seen that there are anticipatory effects, was that there is not only effects on goods that were liberalized, we also see an impact on goods which were duty-free to start with, which was another puzzle, where we think that these duty-free products serve as complements to the products that were liberalized. So when we start exporting more of the liberalized products, it could be that there is a need also to export more, or for the Koreans to import more of those goods that were already duty-free. But this is something that we're looking into for the time being, so I'm not 100% confident on that. So I'm going to round up with a few words on the new EU trade policy, which will be presented in, I don't know if it's in September, end October. It depends a little bit on the schedule and how things go. But the Commissioner said that trade policy should become more inclusive and more effective. And with inclusive, I think to some extent she refers to what has already been the case for the TTIP negotiations, where texts have become available to the public. Mandates and text proposals are available online. And there is some ongoing work with member states and parliament to see if this can be extended also into other types of trade negotiations. More effective, there should be more emphasis, I think, in this trade policy communication on SMEs. They face the same hurdles or burdens as larger companies do, but fixed costs are more difficult to bear for SMEs than for the large firms, obviously. That would be, I think, something on liberalization of green goods ongoing in Geneva, and more, tackling other types of trade barriers, access to raw materials, something that we've seen a little bit of before, but perhaps will be emphasized even more. There will be a drive on EU values. I think this is a part which is very important for the Commissioner. Human rights and values. And the question is, what more can we do in this area? I think we are at the forefront with our GSP Plus scheme, and perhaps we can get some inspiration from that and further develop some chapters of sustainable development in our FTAs. Can trade policy tackle corruption, for instance? Is there something we can do in that area? And also on responsible sourcing, where we've lately had this initiative about this whole public conflict minerals, how some of the firms are sourcing minerals in the internet. And the last point, bringing our negotiating agenda up to date. I could see that there will be more emphasis on trying to revive the WTO negotiations because of its systemic implications, and because it is actually much simpler if we could have one set of rules for all the countries instead of having all this
web of different bilateral free trade agreements which we do have today. If we can make this come together at the WTO, that would be a big step forward. And of course, finishing the negotiations that are ongoing to Japan and implement what we've done. For instance, the EPAs in Africa, which I think most of them have been concluded. And then when we look forward further, what else can we do? Well, we are going to deepen our free trade agreements with Chile, with Turkey, and I think with Morocco and Tunisia. So those sort of older generation FTAs will be subject to a new drive to try to include more elements that we want to see in modern EU free trade agreements. So I'll stop.